Hi, I'm M. Blackman-Mathis, the Kennel and Help Center Manager at SICSA Pet Adoption Center. We're here today to talk about community cats and SICSA's Community Cat Initiative. So first, let's talk about a little bit about why we might be here. Why are you watching this video? Why are you attending these seminars? Some people might have cats in their yard that they don't want there. Some people might be frustrated that the open intake facilities in their area are no longer taking cats. And some people might really want to know how they can help. No matter where you are on the spectrum, SICSA is here to talk to you about how we as a community can help community cats. SICSA's approach is a four-prong approach, starting with understanding, so really understanding where our community is coming from, then educating about what community cats are, who they affect, and how we can help. Then focusing on TNR, which is trap, neuter, and return, so the major, most effective program for supporting and managing community cats. And then engagement, which is where you guys come in. So how can we engage the community? Because SICSA feels very strongly that this is not just an animal welfare organization's issue. This is not just our responsibility as one of the local organizations to take care of. This really is a community program. Really, without you, this program doesn't work. All right, so step one, understanding. We're going to start with what is the difference between a community cat and an owned cat. Community cats can be anywhere from super, super friendly, they love jumping on your lap, waking up with you in the morning on your porch, to absolutely, completely wild. They could be friendly, they could be not friendly. They don't necessarily have an owner, so nobody has registered them or purchased them from somewhere or adopted them even from an organization. These are cats who find their people in the community, and they could even have several caregivers. Owned cats, on the other hand, do have an owner. They could be indoor and outdoor. Again, they could range from super friendly to a little bit less friendly, but they have a single owner. They are typically spayed and neutered, whereas community cats often aren't, which is why we're focusing on the TNR aspect of this program. Step two, education. So let's start with a little bit of explanation about where our community has started, where the mindset of animal welfare has really come from. Traditionally, the industry standard of dealing with community cats has been to have a contract with an open intake facility, or what some people refer to as high kill facilities, where they round up all the cats through animal control officers or local people, and they round them all up, take them to the shelter, and then the shelter can do whatever they want with them. Traditionally, that doesn't work. Also, there are lots of organizations that try to manage this community cat program with feeding bans. For instance, they make it illegal in the city or township to feed outside your house. So if you have an indoor-outdoor cat, you're not allowed to feed it outside. You can even be cited for that. Feeding bans also don't work because people are going to feed. They're really hard to enforce, and it punishes law-abiding citizens who really want to support and care about these cats. The other way to manage the community cat process historically has been to just ignore it. So there are lots of cities who basically are like, we don't care, they're not really that big of a deal to us, there aren't that many people who care about them, we're just going to ignore it, there's no money to deal with it. None of these solutions, feeding bans, the community contracts, or these feeding bans really work to reduce populations or eliminate unnecessary shelter death. The reason that the community contracts, which is again the rounding up of the cats and removing them from the situation, why that doesn't work is because it creates something called the vacuum effect. This effect happens regardless of how you're setting it up. If it's you're picking them up and putting them in a shelter, or you're picking them up and placing them in adoptive homes, or you're picking them up and relocating them through different working cat placements. The reason that this doesn't work is because all you're doing is scooping up all of these cats, moving them to a different location, like the shelter or something like that, and then allowing for new cats to move in. The reason that new cats move in is because you haven't actually removed any of the resources. So you're not removing any of the safe shelter, you're not removing any of the food, you're not removing any of the other resources that those cats have been drawn to that area to be supported by. So if you just pick them up and move them, that creates this space, what we call the vacuum effect, for those new cats to move in. So you create this endless cycle of removing cats, and then new cats moving in, and then removing them, and then new cats moving in, and then removing them, and new cats moving in. So you're basically wasting all of this energy and money and resources and still creating this never-ending cycle. So what about the community cats who do end up in the shelter? Or what about the community cats that end up in a facility? Don't animal shelters put animals like that up for adoption? While yes, we would love to do that, Quite often, cats who are used to living outside are very, very uncomfortable living inside. So being in a shelter facility is actually incredibly stressful for these animals. They're not used to being caged. They're not used to being around lots of different people and lots of strangers. While they may be used to their caregivers in the community, they're not used to being in that high stress environment. What that does is set them up for failure in several ways. One is by disease. Because they're stressed, just like humans, they're more likely to get sick, and quite often facilities can't treat them. That's because the second reason is behaviorally. They become virtually impossible to handle. They're very scared, so they lash out, either through biting or scratching. What that does is then set them up for not being considered adoption candidates. So now for the hard stats for our community specifically, and this is for Montgomery County. Previous management led to, this is in 2018, the stats, the euthanasia rate for cats at the Animal Resource Center, this is our open intake facility that reports their stats publicly, was 1,700 cats died in 2018. This is down from 2017. So in 2017, we had a live release rate, so that's animals leaving the facility, a live release rate of 40% for cats. So only 40% of the cats that came into the Animal Resource Center left it alive. That's for all sorts of reasons. Now, granted, they do take lots of injured and dangerous animals, but in these instances, cats are one of those things that, again, if you're taking a community cat, a wild cat, into a facility like this, it's not going to do super well. In 2018, that did bump up to a 60% live release rate, which is great. So the true cost of ineffective programs, this is sort of what I was talking about, wasting resources. Again, the picking cats up, taking them to the facility, new cats moving in, picking them up, taking them to the facility, new cats moving in. Basically, this creates that endless cycle of resource use that is a waste. It doesn't solve the problem, the population never stabilizes, and results in massive amounts of unnecessary death. Traditional approaches result in a constant cycle of high cost and have basically no benefits. You're wasting a lot of people resources by going into these communities, trying to trap these cats. It takes a lot of time sometimes. Drive time, gas time, municipal dollars that are really going to this cycle, and you're still having the same problems week after week, month after month, year after year. What can we do? I know it sounds like a huge problem and there doesn't seem to be a clear answer, but there is, and SICSA is here to help. The goal of the SICSA Community Cat Initiative is to stabilize populations and drastically reduce shelter deaths. The immediate goal is not to immediately reduce outside cat populations. While that does happen, it can take several years, up to 10, for those populations to stabilize and reduce. The immediate goal of aggressive TNR is to stabilize those populations so we can stem the flow. We do that through step 3, TNR. Trap, neuter, return programs have been incredibly effective in every community that they're effectively implemented in. Now you have to do a really good job of doing enough fast enough to make a dent in the population and stabilize it. You can't just do a trickle in here and there. It really takes the community all working together towards the same goal. So trap, neuter, return is really, really simple. The cats are trapped by community members. They are brought to a facility like SICSA, like the Humane Society, like Pets and Stitches. They undergo surgery and their ears are notched. The reason that we notch their ears, which is where you surgically remove the top third of an ear, so that from a distance, especially for the more wild ones, you can tell whether or not that animal has been spayed or neutered. Then the cats are returned to the location from which they came. So if you trap, neuter, and release, which is the traditional, the more traditional, older version of this, where they're trapping, neutering, and then taking them somewhere else, if you just release an outside cat somewhere else, you're setting that cat up for failure. It doesn't know where the food resources are. It doesn't know where the shelter is. It doesn't know how busy those streets are. So it can't keep itself safe in that situation. That's why the return part is also beneficial for the cats. Not only will it defend its territory and keep new cats from moving in, you're setting that cat up for success because it is happy, stable, and supported. TNR also makes these cats better neighbors. So there are tons of reasons that people don't want cats in their yard. They don't want to interact with these community cats. They can be very frustrating. They're loud. They scream and yowl and fight with each other. They have lots of kittens and make a mess. They could potentially get each other sick by fighting and all of these things. TNR eliminates almost all of those behaviors. First of all, TNR completely eliminates unwanted litters because if they don't have the parts, they can't make more babies. That's great. That is 100% effective. If you TNR everybody, you're not going to have surprise kittens. It reduces other nuisance behaviors like the yowling and fighting because a lot of those, including spraying, a lot of those things are hormonally driven. So if you remove the hormones, you're removing the drive for them to do that. The cats are also healthier because they're not fighting, because they're not wasting resources, creating litters and things like that. They have more for themselves. So their immune systems are better. It's a requirement in our county and our cities to vaccinate for rabies. So they're all vaccinated for rabies, which makes the community safer. And it reduces the risk of illness or injury from those fights. This is an example of a county in Florida that over 20 years, you can see a demonstrated drop in unnecessary shelter intakes. So reducing the intakes to those high intake facilities means you're basically eliminating those unnecessary shelter deaths. So starting at almost 4,500 shelter deaths, this is that 35, the orange line here, drops down to 351 over 20 years. So the Alliance for Cat and Dog Contraception ran a simulation. So yeah, this was a computer program that they ran with all of these different data points for a 10-year period. And they ran the simulation to demonstrate the different types of programs that communities have used to manage community cats. So we have no action, ignore it. Heavy culling, which is the taking them away and removing them, typically through shelter death. Ineffective TNR, so that's that trickle through a few here and there. And then effective TNR, which is lots of surgeries in a short amount of time to try to really capture these populations in a really effective way. So over 10 years in this simulation, you can see the number of kittens drops where the no action, so that's the baseline, no action is above 1,000. The number of kittens with effective TNR is almost nothing. Early kitten deaths, so these are because populations, when they get really big, kittens have a hard time staying alive in these overpopulated areas. Early kitten deaths are from disease, if there's a dense population of cats and they're not well cared for, or they're fighting and things like that. Early kitten deaths with the baseline, again, almost 1,000. Early kitten deaths with effective TNR, basically nothing. Partly because the populations are stable, partly because you're not really having extra kittens happen, which is great. Premature deaths. This is both the shelter deaths, so community cats who are rounded up and taken to shelters, and also adults who are dying unnecessarily in the community. Again, this is right at 1,000, and with effective TNR, basically nothing. The number of adult populations over 10 years, the number of adults in these stable populations, so the baseline starts at right over 200, with heavy culling, so this is the picking up and removal. The population actually increases over 10 years, so you see that little bump up in the red. And then with effective TNR, the population does almost drop in a little bit more than half over 10 years. So again, it might take 10 years for the population to really reduce all the way, but it is still more effective than either doing nothing or the heavy culling, the picking up and removal. So this demonstration, and you can read more, we'll include the link as well, you can read more on this study. They included demographics, geographics, disease management, all sorts of things, age, and they did it over 10 years. It was an incredible study that they did. So this really demonstrates if you do nothing, what happens, and then if you do these culling programs, what happens, and then also if you're doing effective TNR. Step 4, engagement. This is where you come in. SICSA cannot do this alone. We can provide help, we can provide support, we can provide traps, we can provide lots of different things, information. We are here to help you. We need your help too. There are lots of different ways you can help community cats. You can become a caregiver. If you're one of these people who's like, yes, I love my community cats, this one's Buster and this one's Jeremy and this one's Susie, I love them, I know when they come, I feed them at this time and this day, you could be that. You could also be someone who pools money for spay-neuter. You could help your community coalition support or create a pool of TNR money so that people who are doing these transports can pay for it. You can participate or support or donate directly to TNR programs like SICSA and the Humane Society. You can actually be the one doing the transport. So, okay, well, I don't have any cats around me, but I'm willing to do the transport. Come get hooked up with us. We'll hook you up with people who can help to figure out where the help is needed for these transports. population management in terms of paying attention to who lives where and when these cats are showing up. And oh, we noticed that Buster has a wound. We should probably trap him again and get him taken care of. You can also troubleshoot with neighbors and with SICSA to work on deterrence that works. So if you have some neighbors that really love the cats and want them around, and then you have some neighbors who are like, I hate that they're here, I don't want them here, I need them to go, and they're really, really frustrated, you can be that go-between, or you can help partner people together to work on deterrence to make some places safer and some places less appealing to these cats. Becoming a caregiver, there are 4 basic aspects. So shelter, you can provide basic shelter from, a Rubbermaid bin with some styrofoam in it to an actual built-in, like shed-style chicken coop or something where the cats can be safe. Doesn't have to be super fancy. It's whatever level you're comfortable with. Food. The most important thing about food is only putting out the amount for the amount of cats that you have, and also not free feeding. So a lot of the ordinances have stipulations on reckless feeding, and that just means, okay, well, cool, I'm gonna go feed the cats and I'm gonna dump half the bag, and that'll be good for a week. That is not how animals work. You need to be putting out no more than about a quarter cup of food per cat per feeding. And if you're feeding twice a day, they would get up to a half a cup a day total. So really, it's not very much. They don't need a ton. And if you put out more than that, then what you're doing is attracting other wildlife, you're attracting other cats, you create that unstable environment so that either more cats, or you have more fighting, or you have more animals, or you have more pests. When the cats are done eating, you pick up the extra food and remove it. That way, again, you're not leaving it out overnight. Tracking. Monitoring the cats is really important. Some people monitor them very closely, some people don't. Again, it's up to you what your level of comfort is as a caregiver. If you want to help us do some population management and pay attention to microchips and flow over a couple of years of figuring out how the cats are moving around, that'd be great. We would love that. Again, it's getting with your neighbors and figuring out who's feeding what, who's providing which resources, which is great. Again, the biggest thing about being a caregiver is this TNR piece. You can't be effective in what we're doing for community cats without TNR. What about those people who are like, I do not want them here, I don't care about them, they're in my way? That's okay too. You can work together with your neighbors, like I said, create a pool of funds for TNR. You can encourage the cats into safety, so if there are yards where you know that they're safe, you can encourage the cats there. We'll talk a little bit about that. You can also discourage the cats from being in your yard by using what we call aversives or deterrence. And again, we'll go through some of these things. Either way, the safest place for these cats is in their communities. The safest place for them is not to be picked up and removed, not to be picked up and killed, not to be picked up and adopted. The safest place for community cats is in the communities in which they have lived. Deterrence. We're going to go through some real basic deterrence now. Some of the best ones are motion-activated sprinklers and lights. Just startle the cats. That can help. Also, if you have a dog, make sure that it's okay to use dogs safely as long as they're not actually catching the cat, to startle cats and scare them away. You can also use their urine or feces around the edge of your yard to tell the cats that there is a dog that lives there. You can put out other strong fragrances like citrus or coffee or vinegar. You can put them in small containers or just in your flower beds around the edges. Again, those strong smells will deter cats from going to the bathroom. Physical deterrence in the dirt. So what we have here is a picture of a scat mat. So it's essentially a soft mat that has finger-like projections that are a little bit soft, but it just makes it a little bit uncomfortable for the cats to walk on. You can use that loosely covered in dirt in your flower beds to prevent them from digging. You can also put chicken wire in your flower gardens to prevent that digging and urination and defecation in your yards. If you're having an issue with paw prints in places that you don't want on your brand new car, my recommendation, get a car cover. I know it's a little bit inconvenient, and at the same time, you're protecting your vehicle and saving the lives of these cats. You can prevent cats from jumping over fences by installing essentially a little roll bar or a projection at about 45 degrees. There's a picture of this at the top of this slide that prevents the cats from jumping over the fences into your yard or out of your yard. If you're trying to protect your indoor-outdoor cat, this is what you can install. Cats won't jump over something if they can't see where they're going to land safely. So these types of barriers help to dissuade them from trying to jump these fences. What about the birds? We have a huge and beautiful songbird population here. And outdoor cats absolutely do like to hunt and catch prey. There are some things you can do to manage this. Again, you can use deterrents. If you love watching your songbirds, you can use deterrents to scare the cats away from the location that the birds normally reside. You can also make sure that your feeding stations for your birds are far enough away from covered brush where the cats could potentially be hiding and catch them while they're eating. Make sure they're at least 20 feet away from any sort of hiding spots that the cats could get into. And make sure you're cleaning up the bird seed, because if the bird seed is attracting other pests like mice or rats or things like that that you're not necessarily noticing, you're going to attract more cats. So making sure to keep that area as clean as possible. There are some really good TNR resources in the Miami Valley. This slide goes through them. SICSA is in the process. We have a couple of agreements with some local municipalities where we're working really hard to target those communities specifically. So if you're in one of those communities, please check out our website. You can go to sicsa.org/TNR. All of the costs are on there. Our basic program is about $45. We have some programs that are less than that, so don't let the cost scare you away. If you want help with TNR, please contact us. We will help you in whatever way we can. We also rent traps, as does the Humane Society, and the traps themselves are humane traps, and so they safely capture the cats, and so that you can bring them in for their surgery times. Surgeries typically happen in the mornings. You drop them off in the morning and then pick them up in the evening. Most organizations are like that, so it's really great. It's a one-stop shop. We'll do everything in the same day, and then you get to take them back. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I am extremely passionate about community cats. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. My name is Em. I'm the Kennel and Help Center Manager, and I love community cats, so let me know if you need any help.